Welcome to toy-polloi.
Hello and welcome to another video from toy-polloi, and in today's video we're going to be taking a look at the third set of figures from Kenner's Retro Adventures of Indiana Jones toy lines, and these ones are based on characters from the Last Crusade. There are three in the collection. We have Indiana Jones, we have Sallah, and we have Dr. Henry Jones. Now these are all new figures but just sort of done in a retro style. I've previously reviewed the other two waves, so if you haven't checked those out then please do. But let's crack on and see what these figures are like. First up, let's take a closer look at the cards. So we'll start with Indiana Jones, as he's obviously the main character. Here you can see this is a modified version of the original Indy figure. They've taken the original Indy figure and done a few little changes to him. On this one they've basically given him a tie. It looks like they've also toned down the colour of his jacket. The first version of Indy that they released, the jacket was a very dark, almost black, sort of brown colour. This one is looking a lot lighter, so it actually looks a lot more like the original figure. He comes with his bag over his shoulder. He's got a gun and he's also got the Holy Grail there. On the card you can see there's a fairly nice image of Indy riding on the German motorcycle. Everything else about this card is pretty much the same to the other ones. It's just this image that has changed. We've still got the image showing the sort of quick draw action. It does say the Last Crusade there, and if we turn it over on the back you can see we now have an image of the three figures in this wave. All of the rest of this card is taken up with legal mumbo jumbo, which is again reprinted on the bit of paper that's under his feet. But overall I think they've done a really good job on these cards. This card is also the slightly thicker sort of stock card that they've used. The first wave of figures that I got anyway had the much thinner card, and the Temple of Doom Last Crusade one seemed to come on the thicker card. I did buy two versions of Indy because it's always good to sort of do a little comparison, see how they are packaged and see if there's any issues with them. Actually you can see there are a few issues. This one is packed quite sort of strangely. One of his legs is bent, the other one is sort of bent forwards. You can actually see this leg is bent forwards, and there are a few paint issues on this one. I can clearly see there's some sort of paint scuffing on his tie up there, and there's also a paint mark on the bag. This other one doesn't look too bad, so I'm going to open the worst one just because it's always more fun to look at the worst one. But yeah, there's two of those, not looking too bad at all. I also got Sallah, as you can see here. This one, I do really like the card of this. I love this image of Sallah on the front looking really sort of angry, ready to fight. I think that's a very sort of apt picture of him. And the figure itself, actually, like this, doesn't look too bad. There's a fair amount of detail going on. All of the sculpts on these are a bit soft, but we'll check that out when we get them off the card. And the back of this card is exactly the same as the other one. And then finally we have Dr. Henry Jones Snr. Again, I do love this image. I think that's a really nice picture there of Sean Connery. It's such a sort of iconic shot of him with his umbrella up. He was always quite a unique character in that movie. And you can see here that we have the figure. This one, I've seen a few people mention this. The umbrella that he comes with doesn't really seem to stay in the packet properly. In fact, on this one it is loose. You can see I can rattle it around. I think this just seems to be a bad packaging problem. I've mentioned the bad packaging in the previous videos. The sort of the way they package stuff actually bends weapons and does sort of quite damage to the figures or distorts the figures as they are packaged. This one just seems to be not very well packaged at all. And as I say, I've seen a few of these around like this, so it's going to be a common issue. You'll quite often find the umbrella loose on them. So let's open these up and see what the figures are like once they're out of the packet. We can take a closer look at everything. Okay, so they've now been released from the packaging, and I have to say overall they don't look too bad. I've been a little bit disappointed by the previous figures. They aren't the greatest of sculpts, but actually when you get them out of the packet and sort of start moving them and play with them, they aren't really that bad at all. There are a few sort of issues with them. I think the Indy figure that I've opened here has the most issues, but they are fixable. I've done a video already on how to fix the most common issues on them, so I'll link to that at the end of this one. But overall I think they're not too bad figures. So let's take a closer look at them. We'll start with Indy because I can then compare him to the other two versions that I have, and I'll point out some of the differences, and yeah, I'll point out the issues that this guy has. Right, so let's start with what I like about this figure. The main thing I like is the fact that he's actually come with his bag. This is something that was missing from the other two figures. I know the original version of Indy didn't come with a bag, it just came with his gun and his whip, but when they did the Temple of Doom version, they sort of shortchanged us on accessories. He just comes with a machete, and really what you wanted was a bag with him. And I think the bag accessory is going to be something would make me want to buy more of this version of Indy, so I can actually put that bag with these other figures. I think this figure would look so much better with the bag. In fact, let's do it. Let's take this bag off and we'll pop that onto the Temple of Doom version and see how much better he looks. There we go. Immediately that makes that figure look so much better. So I really wish that they had done that when they'd released this Temple of Doom one. It just seemed a very sort of short-changed figure. They'd basically given you a machete. That's it. Not enough. The sculpt on it is okay, but with the bag he looks a whole lot better. So I think that's something a lot of people will want to do. Buy a second version of this Last Crusade version of Indy and put the bag on the Temple of Doom version of the figure. That certainly improves him no end. The rest of the figure is fairly similar to the other ones. It's sort of a slightly modified sculpt. They've modified the front of him to add a tie. The coloured plastic that they've used is a lot lighter. You can see here, this is the first version, and it's very dark on the sort of dark brown leather. This one's a little bit lighter, and it does look a lot more like Indy does in the movies. The addition of a tie is a fairly simple change. There's a bit of a bad sort of paint application on this one. If I bring it in so you can sort of see, we've got a sort of a scuff on the top of the tie there, and it's also marked the lapel of his shirt. So it's just sort of, you do have to be a bit careful on how these things are painted, and make sure to check before you buy them. This one also does have a very wonky leg. This leg has been bent in the packaging, so it's all at a sort of strange angle. It makes him quite hard to stand up, but that is fixable. As I say, I've done a video showing how to fix that. He comes with the gun, as you can see here, which fits reasonably well in his hand. It's supposed to fit in this holster on his leg, but it doesn't, because the sculpt is sort of a very soft version of the original figure. This gun barely fits in there. In fact, you can just sort of about pop it in like that, but it will fall out if you do anything to him. If you move him about, that will just fall out. So it sort of works. On the original figures, the sort of vintage original figures, that feature works really nicely. On these new ones, it's not particularly great. This figure does also come with the quick draw action, the same as the other versions of Indy that are available. So this arm is spring loaded, and you can flip it up like that, and he's supposed to sort of quick draw. But as you can see, the gun is a little bit loose in his hand. So if I pop that back in his hand, we've dropped the grail now as well, everything's falling out. So if I put that back in his hand and flip it up, you can see it does work reasonably well, but sometimes you will find that the gun fires out and goes across the floor, so make sure not to lose it. But it does work reasonably well, that. He does come with a tiny little version of the grail, which fits fairly nicely in his hand. And yeah, I actually think this is probably, of all the Indy figures they've released, of the 3 Indy figures they've released, I think this is probably my favourite one. It just looks the best, even with those paint applications and the sort of the wonky leg. I think it looks the best. They've left on this side space for the whip to fit. Again, they could have given him that accessory. Get rid of the grail. The grail's, you know, it's a nicety, but actually I think the whip would have been better, and you could have had a really perfect figure. So if you want to get a perfect figure, I think you're going to have to buy all 3 and take accessories from each, and then you can make nicer versions of each. But certainly I think of the 3 that they've released, I think this is my favourite so far. Next up we have Dr. Henry Jones Snr. When I first saw this figure, I wasn't that impressed with it. It reminded me more of like a Super 7 type figure. There's something off with the face sculpt. The face sculpt is not bad, but I think the head is too tall. It looks really strange. If that had been shrunk down a bit, it would look a lot better. You can see there's some detail there painted onto his face. He also has glasses on, which they've not painted, but they're sort of sculpted into the face there. It's a fairly simple figure, like all of these. It has bendable legs at the knees, and the only accessory it comes with is this little umbrella. Again, I think they've sort of shortchanged us on these figures. They should have given him another accessory. Most of the movie he's walking around with an umbrella and a bag, so just give him a bag as well. Some of the figures they released in 2008, they did a nice version where it was the sort of the bag and the umbrella joined together so he could hold them all in one. Something like that would have been really nice, but as it is, we just get him with the umbrella, which he has to hold at one end like this, because if you try and hold the other end, it doesn't fit in his hand. It's really loose. You can sort of just about balance it on there like that, But yeah, that looks a bit strange. So if you want him to hold it, you have to hold it further down. Overall, it's not a bad figure. I think the sculpt is fairly sort of amateur in the way it's done. They're trying to sort of recreate the look of these old style figures, but I think they've gone a little bit too far. It could do with a lot more detail adding, and I think if you'd added a little bit more of sort of a bulk to this, it would look like he actually had a jacket on over trousers. At the moment it just looks like he's got a onesie on, and yeah, it's a bit sort of, to me it just looks a bit naive, so I think a little bit more detail on that would have really improved it. The final figure we have here is Sallah, and actually this one I do really like. I think it's a good representation of the character. He's got his fez on there. They've done a nice little bit of extra detail on the ties, sort of doing a little bit of a print there to add the pattern. He comes sort of with one accessory, as you can see, which is just the gun. This is the same gun that comes with the Indy figure, and yeah, not really a huge amount you can say about him. The sculpt is okay, actually. It could do with a little bit more detailing like the other ones, but the overall effect of it is it's a pretty nice figure. Same sort of articulation. You can rotate his legs just about. The legs on this one, they don't have enough of a sort of curve on the top of them, so actually bending this leg round is really tough. That's about as far as you can get it. Let's try the other leg. Yeah, the same. You can't really bend his leg. They needed to add a bit more of a curve there to the top of it. Actually, if I bring in Indy Senior, or Henry Senior, you can see that one rotates nicely. There's just enough gap there so you can rotate the leg around, and it sits in the sort of the sat down position. On him, it's just not big enough gap, so you really got to force it. It actually feels like you're going to break the figure. I think I can see it bending a bit in there. So yeah, that's a little bit sort of a shame. Again, it's like all of these things, they've just not put enough effort into making them. These fine details, you know, it's not even a fine detail, these just sort of basic details should have been spotted before this got to a final manufacture. So overall it's a nice figure, but it is let down by sort of issues like that. The fact that you can't actually pose it. It's supposed to have posability, and this one doesn't. Okay, and so here we go. Here are all of the figures that have been released so far in this retro wave of Adventures of Indiana Jones figures, and the overall effect of them is they are really nice. I'm actually enjoying collecting them, and I'm hopeful that they will produce some more figures, because currently with the Temple of Doom and Last Crusade figures, they've only produced good guys, and what we really need is some bad guys. As you can see on the original sort of wave, there's a good selection of figures. We've got some goodies, we've got some baddies. What we want is more bad guys, and what I would really like is all of the other original figures to be released, because some of those are incredibly hard to find here in the UK. So I'm hoping that at some point they will release some of those other figures so that we can get the full wave of the vintage figures but in the new retro style. And I really do hope that they do some more of the modern versions, because although they have their flaws, there are a few issues in them. The paint application's not great. Some of the plastics used is a bit iffy and sort of ends up a bit bent in the packaging. I do really like them. I think they're a lovely set, and I'm looking forward to getting more, and these are all going to go on display as they are here. And as you can see, I've now fixed Indy's legs, so if you have problems with some of your figures, then as I say, do check out my video on how to fix the bent weapons and bent legs. I just really wish that they had done more with the other versions of Indy, more accessories. All of these accessories are great, but all of the other figures should have had them. I think even the bag could have been put with short round, so I hope that's something that they sort of take note of in future. More accessories to go with these figures. Maybe even they could release like an accessory pack that you could buy. That would be something good. Just lots of bags, really, bags and whips and guns and stuff that we could put with the other figures. That would be a really nice thing to do, because currently only one version of Indy has the bag, and I think all of them need it. But as you can see, I do think they're pretty good figures. So hopefully you've enjoyed this video. If you have, then make sure to hit the subscribe button and tap the bell to be notified each time I upload a new video. And thanks for watching.
Thanks for watching toy-polloi. Subscribe for more great videos. You can also follow toy-polloi on Twitter, Facebook, and Instagram.